Okay, so the last time we worked on this code, we got things to render onto the screen, but then we sort of stopped there. So we want to take the next step in building the content item selector that will embed items that you select into the rich content editor inside of Canvas. So just really quick, here's Canvas, and close this out, maybe. Why is that not closing? Okay, we'll refresh the page since it doesn't want to close. All right, so if I have a rich text editor here, I can push this button. It launches this tool that we're writing, and here are the items that we've rendered so far. So we've just kind of hard-coded these for now, and that's fine. And that should close, but something is strange with my Canvas instance for some reason. So I might have to refresh the page, which kind of stinks because it's slower, but that's all right. Okay, so when I click on one of those, I want it to insert something into this window right here, and that's what we're going to look at. So we've gotten so far as this select item. So if I, once again, open this up, sorry, I'll bring the console over. So here's the console. When I click on one of these, you can see that there's the object. And again, these are just hard-coded for now. We probably want these to come from a database or from a search or something, but we can deal with that in another time. All right, so here's that console log right here. And now I think what we want to do is maybe revisit some of this. Originally, I was thinking that when you clicked on the item, within this method right here, we would call out to the server, make a request, an API request, that would generate the data that we need to then do a post back to Canvas with the content item. But I feel like that process is going to get a little unwieldy. And the reason I think that is after I would add an action right here, and again, actions, we're already using an action, this load items, that makes an API request. So I could potentially have another action in here that would be something like this.props.select item, and then I would give it the item. That would make the API request out to the server that would then generate the data that we need to post back into Canvas, but that would come through in the response from the server. It would hit our data store, and then we would have to have a view that would monitor for that change in state, and then it would automatically post back to Canvas immediately upon receiving that data. And that feels a little bit strange. So I think what we can do is maybe simplify this. So I'm going to try this other approach and see where it takes us. So the approach that I'd like to take is inside of this, let's see, not this guy. Inside of this API call, this items controller, this is where our items are coming from. So we have a really simple method right here. And all this does is this content items is going out to the application controller and getting back the items, and then it's just sending a JSON representation of each of those items, which results in this little bit of data right here. We have an ID, we have a name, we have a source. I think we might be able to send down everything that we need for every item. And I think that this would work fine if you're listing, say, 10 items and maybe even up to 100 items. If I was trying to download thousands of items, then this could be a problem, and we might want to choose a different mechanism. But I think for a small number of items, especially if we're going to page the data, which I think that we would probably do, or provide some kind of a search to filter through the data, I think this other approach might work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in some code from a previous example that we worked on. So we have this content item example that we did a while back. And basically, this was handling the whole experience, the whole rendering of the view without React. And what it would do is you would click one of the items to make your selection. It would hit this show. This content right here gets rendered back to the client right here. Here's the view. And it just generates this form. and then it automatically submits the form for you. So I think what we can do is maybe instead just render a whole bunch of little forms in the page with the data already in place. And so I'm going to give this a try. We're going to experiment. And this, I think, is the simplest way to go. So starting right here, this show method, you can see we're using the IMS LTI gem that InStructure created to generate a consumer object. And then that consumer object has everything that we need to be able to do the content item post back to Canvas. So we're going to copy that code right there and drop it in right here. And then what we're going to do, so this this bit of data right here is fine. That's global to every single item. Hopefully we're going to use the same LTI key and secret. The return URL is going to be the same. So the return URL is the value that we get from Canvas in the LTI launch that tells us where we need to post back to. And so when we make this request now, we're going to need to pass that up to the server. So right here, when we say component wheel mount, load the items, when we call load items, we need to send that data back to the server. So part of the load items action, let's see here. Right here, here's load items. This is going to need a little bit of extra data. So we use JavaScript string interpolation and drop it in right there. And I think, let's just put it right here. We'll just pass it to this action, and then that will hit the server for us. So now in load items right here, I need to know what that return URL is. And whoops, return URL. And so I think we can get it out of the props. So I'm going to do this .props .return URL. And then in order to make that available, it's got to come out of the state. So state.settings, I think, is where that's coming from. So we can verify that by looking at the default client settings. This is all of the data that's getting sent down to the client. And somewhere in here, there is a return URL, and that's not it. We probably need to pass it down to the client. So let me go look, because I don't remember where exactly that's coming from. I think it's content item return URL. Yeah, I think that comes through in the LTI launch, if I remember correctly. Okay, so I'm going to move that out of the way. And we'll try it. We'll know really quickly. All right, and then just to be consistent, I'm going to camel case this just so it looks the same. Okay, so I'll ask for state.settings.contentItem return URL. Hopefully that gives us the right value back. And I should probably camel case this here. So I'm just going to use content item return URL just to be consistent throughout the entire process of getting the data, or pulling that data from the state and then making it available inside of the component on the props. Okay, so now when I call load items, hopefully that's available to me. Let's put it here too. Now, because this is going up to Ruby on Rails, I'm going to change it back to snake case. That's a little bit of a mismatch between what we do with JavaScript and Ruby, but it does make it really easy to see what code is kind of operating in the JavaScript world and which code is operating in the Ruby and Ruby on Rails world. So everything in our Ruby code is snake cased because that's sort of what the community does, and everything in our JavaScript code is camel cased because that's sort of what the community does. All right. So now inside of my controller here, I should be able to ask for the content item return URL. Now that's still going to be called launch URL when I generate this tool config because that's just what the standard is. That's what it's going to be expecting. All right, so we still have to do this content items to JSON. We'll need to handle that here in just a minute. So let's look again at our code and see. All right, so this content items, our content, yeah, this is poorly named. That should be called content items. So that was bad in one of our previous examples. I think we called it that because this is called content items as one of the parameters in the spec. But this collides with this name here. So we've basically thrown away what this method in our application controller. Let's go pull it up. All right, so we have this method in our application controller called content items. It's just returning some dummy data. And that's where this comes from. Excuse me, that's how we get the item right here. And then we stomp on that function and use it as a variable inside of our show method right here. So that's bad. But whatever. Not whatever, let's fix it. So this content items could just be put right in line. Let's get rid of that and do this. Okay. So this content item hash, let's grab this line now and transfer that over to our new project. And now that's going to make a little bit more sense. So now we have to go generate this content object, basically for each one of our items. Okay, so let's see here. Content. Let's do the InbedFrame. Yeah, let's use that as an example. All right, so we created this method called InbedFrame right here, which is just going to generate some HTML. In this case, it's generating an iframe. Now, I think we wanted to try this out with some other kinds of HTML, so this will be a good starting place to make that happen. So let's copy that method and drop that into here. Okay. And then you can see that we use, let's see, here we go. That's how we're generating that content. Okay. Now, what we're going to need to do is iterate over this collection. All right, so when we're done, this items is going to be an array of all of the item objects with additional things, all of this additional stuff that we need to actually make the request to Canvas. All right, now I'm gonna rename this because we're not gonna necessarily use an iframe, but we're gonna maybe call it just like BuildContent. Because what we're going to do is take this item and we're going to build some interesting piece of content around that item. Now, this BuildContent method could examine each item and say, this one is meant to be a link, and this one's meant to be a video, and this one's meant to be an flash or movie or whatever type of thing it needs to generate. And then it would generate the HTML specific to that item. Right now, I'm going to go ahead and just leave it as an iframe right here, just because we have that code done, and then we can go back and experiment and change it. And then the URL, I think, let's see, we have item URL, just on that. I think this should be fine because this will use the example code. So this content item example, I think, has found its way into the Atomic Jolt UTS starter app. So I believe that there's an items controller, and there is right here with the show method. So this is what's going to get called and embedded in the iframe. Again, that's not a really big deal because I think we're going to swap out some of what is generated, but at least we'll have something functioning right here, and hopefully that doesn't crash. All right, so when we build that content, we're going to give it a type of content item, media type of text HTML, and then the text is actually going to be that iframe. Again, this could be whatever HTML we need. And then I think we need to wrap that, we need to get this content item hash function from over here. So that's this guy, and it's going to basically wrap up this other, like we're just building a bigger hash as we go. So now this guy will have as items this array right here when all is said and done. So see, content item hash is called with content, and content came from BuildContent, and then we're going to turn that into JSON. All right, so then we're going to do that for each one of those items. So we probably, let's see here. So that's going to return this consumer object for each one of those items, and that's not going to get us the whole way there. So again, looking at our content item example that we worked on before, this is the data that we end up needing, is the data to generate this form. So let's copy this form, and for just a second, let's go back to our item.jsx. So here's this home page is what's going to render each one of these items. You can see that right here. So inside of the item.jsx, we're going to return that form, or we're going to build that form. And so now this will help us to determine what data we actually need. So we can tell we need this launch URL. I actually don't need this other form data right here. I can get rid of that. Don't need that. Okay, so this will give us the launch URL. We'll go replace this here in just a second. And then we need to get these key value pairs to actually launch the item, and instead of saying launch the tool, this should probably be some kind of a name of the item that we want. So this will be something like item.name, and this, converting it over, let's see here. Launch date data is going to equal something like launch data. Let's just call it launch data. That's fine. I'll use Lodash's method here. So basically, we're kind of turning some of this Ruby code into a little bit of JavaScript code and beginning to model the data that we want to get back from the server. So this guy over here, let's see, in this items controller, we're going to expect this to have launch data that looks like, sorry, this right here, kind of. So we're going to take the consumer and we're going to iterate over each pair, and basically we want the key and the value, so something like this. Actually, not like that. Let's just do this. You know what? The generate launch data actually might just return what we need, I guess, because we're going to just grab, we're going to get a dictionary hash, whatever we want to call it here. There we go. Not iterate over it. So that's our launch data. All right, so we're getting a little closer to this. All right, so that gives us the launch data for each item. And I think what we can do is item.merge in this guy right here. And then this is what's going to be returned as we iterate over the content items. And so that's what will be in items. It'll be this new dictionary of key value pairs with the launch data plus whatever was originally in item, which will keep the ID and the name and the URL. Hopefully this works. Okay, so that should give us this data right here. Looks like we also need the launch URL, so let's grab that. So the launch URL will be the consumer.launch URL. So now this will be this guy right here, item.launch URL. And this launch data we should be able to iterate over and generate these guys right here. So then we'll be able to just render this launch data right there. Hopefully we still have the item name. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this because now we don't need this link that calls this method. So that allows us to refactor the code that calls us. We'll get rid of this select item altogether, so we won't need that. And we can get rid of this. So now item becomes relatively simple. Just as a side note, I also added item.id here for a key. It was, if you iterate over a collection in React and you don't have a key for each item in that collection, it'll throw a warning. So that was as good as anything. I guess we could do something like this as well. So you could put like item underscore. Oops. There we go. So then it's clear, what this thing is. All right. So I think we'll close that. Going back into here, we need to generate this data correctly. So we have a key and a value. So the name can be the key. And value is the value here. So that should generate the correct form data. Did something wrong here. Oh, I know what I did wrong. This should not be in here. Oops, that should be there. There we go. All right, semicolon. Okay. Make sure I got everything. Now, in theory, this should work, but in practice, it rarely does the first time. So let's go ahead and give this a try and see what happens, and then fix the whatever errors I managed to generate. All right, so it looks like it's not liking adding this. We probably need to URL encode that. Make sure that's true. Oh yeah. Yeah, and there shouldn't be two of the question marks. So it looks like somewhere in our code, open back up the item.js action. So we tack this on, but I think it's adding other stuff somewhere down below us. So let's go look at that. So this API middleware. think that's what's adding it. Let me go look at that again. Oh, it's tacking on. Okay, it is what's adding it. All right. So it's adding in this OAuth consumer key. So we should be passing this as params instead. So let's go back and do this. Okay, let's try this again. Okay, so it looks like this time our Rails code crashed, so let's go take a look at that. See what broke. All right, so items controller line 41, build content. That's a mail class. So, content. Oh, that's bad right there. What's that? Okay, so it looks like on the Rails side we succeeded. So that's good. Something bad happened inside of our code, but we can fix that. Looks like item right here is invalid. Now I do want to, let's see, take a look at the network request because I'm curious. So I made a bunch of assumptions about what this data would look like. So let's go grab it and take a look at it. And then we can go fix things. So paste that in and format it. So here's what we turned our items into on the server before we even pass things down to the client. So we still have our ID, we still have a name, we still have a source. Now we have a launch URL. So that's where we post back to. And you can see that that is the Instructure, or I'm sorry, the Canvas instance at Instructure that I'm using. And there's the external dialog. So that looks good. Here's the OAuth consumer key. So here's all those key value pairs that are going to get passed back. You can see it contains different OAuth data. Here's the nonce. Luckily, by the time we upload this video, all of these secrets will be invalid. So, so I can go ahead and just leave them in the video. I've put in this fake ID. Here's the actual content. So you can see content items. And this should have that iframe with all of the various stuff. So depending on how much HTML we generate, this could get really big. So this content items, you can see as I scroll over here to the right, it's pretty good size right now for a fairly small amount of data. So if I was generating, say, large amounts of HTML with paragraphs or, I don't know, something more sophisticated, your API call could get rather large. So again, you'd probably want to page this data or come up with a different strategy where we don't pre-generate all the data. I like this strategy because it's relatively simple, where the other strategy just required a lot more steps. So we'll go with this one, and if it becomes a problem, if the size of the payload becomes a problem, we'll optimize it later and we'll deal with it then. But I think that this is a pretty good option for right now. All right, so there's all of our key value pairs. So that looks good. Okay, so that was relatively painless. Our Rails code worked and did a great job. And so now over here, when we're iterating over our items, we have a bug that we got to deal with. So let's go look at that. So item.jsx line 45 just says item is not defined. So I probably just missed something inside of here. Let's see. Item.launch data, this is not defined. Okay, so this is our problem. This.props dot item. And actually, I guess what we could do is this. If we just want to shorten this up a little bit, we can do const item equals the stuff item, and then we can use that throughout this little piece of code. All right, let's try this again. Okay, so let's take a look and see what the item looks like. All right, so it looks like a legitimate React component. I was hoping, there we go. Maybe we can catch the next one here. All right, so let's over that. There's our item, so that looks fine. Let's go ahead and generate the launch data. See what that looks like. Oh, so now we have a problem. The launch data did not result in anything. Okay, so item dot launch data. Okay, and that's why. It's because it's data from the Rails server, and so it's snake cased, and I have it camel cased. So let's take care of that really quickly. And this is sort of that impedance mismatch between the Rails code and the JavaScript code. We run into this all the time. You just have to be aware of where the data came from and make sure to name it correctly. Okay, so that should fix our problem. Let's go ahead and try this again. All right, so now we have a bunch of these objects, the React components, their inputs, so I'm going to go ahead and make the assumption that it generated them correctly, and if it didn't, we'll go deal with that. All right, so now we have this warning again because we iterated over a bunch of things, and it's saying you have to have a key on there. So let's add one. So let's just do key equals key, because that seems reasonable enough. Although, actually, let's do this. Let's do item.id underscore key. There. Let's again. Okay, so we didn't get any errors, and now we have these buttons here. We're getting close, I think. So there's what looks like a legitimate form. Let's go ahead and push a button. Let's see what happens. It says retrieving content. Oh, there's an error over here. So this is an error in the canvas code. So something about our post is incorrect, and I think we just crashed it. So let's see if we can figure out what went wrong. Okay, so wow, I think we really crashed it. That's interesting. Okay, let's go back to the example and see if we can see something that doesn't look quite right. So here's, this code worked, so we should be good there. There's this show right here. Sorry, I'm just trying to figure out what it is that we're missing. Something in here is not quite right. Okay, so I did this wrong. Inside of the component, when you use a Lodash map, the value comes before the key. So we have them swapped. So if we swap those, then hopefully this will work. We'll see. All right, so we can see that we've generated the buttons correctly. Let's go ahead and inspect that code. Take a look. So the names are in the right spot now, and the values appear to be in the right spot. So let's find out what happens. I'll look at that. Now it's generating this this iframe right here, which you can't unfortunately preview. Here, I'm going to get rid of both of these. Let's do it again just so I can be sure about what it's inserting. All right, so let's do this one more time. Insert this logo. Okay, so it's put it right there. Let's save the page. Okay, and there's the logo. But now it's embedded this logo inside of an iframe, which is a little bit silly, and so we could add a couple of things to kind of to deal with that. But at this point, are any questions?
I think it's a bigger question in like we'll be pulling the data from the server eventually, but right now those images are in the Rails asset pipeline, and we're rendering it using React. So I'm just a little bit confused about the role of the Rails asset pipeline and Webpack.
That's a really good question, and it's actually a little bit of a challenging problem. So what you need to what's that?
Ideally, we want to be ideally we want to be pulling all the content from the server. So, yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead and answer.
Oh no, that's exactly what you want to be able to do is have some server provide you with all of the these items, regardless of their media type, and so when you deploy an application with Ruby on Rails, you have to deal with the Rails asset pipeline, which is going to change the names of items. Okay, so it really depends on the architecture of the application. If you know ahead of time what all of the items are going to be, then you might upload all of those items alongside of your Rails application and just put all of the images, for example, inside of the assets images folder right here. If you were to do that, then when you call this method right here, you're going to need to, for each one of these guys, call the image path or image URL. So let's use that as an example. Let's go to the application controller. And so I've got these guys right here, and let's format that. Let's put a type, and this is an image. I guess they're both images, so let's just tweak everything a little bit as we go. And so UTS banner and UTS PNG, and okay, so those are part of the asset pipeline right here. And everything's fine. Now, in our current example, because we are wrapping this in an iframe, let's pull this up and look at the code. So you can see we're in an iframe right here, and I'm requesting item number 1, and so there's the new name, right? Like it did what you would expect a Rails application to do. We asked for an item, it gave us back that item, and that item happens to be an image, and it's using the hashed name of that image. If we don't want to put this in an iframe, somehow we want to get this name directly into the HTML. So let's walk through that. Oops, just push the wrong button. Okay, so these guys, we now know that they are of type image, so when we iterate over them in our controller right here, let's see. let's go ahead and add an image URL. Okay, so if I do this, then I don't even need that type because I'm just assuming that it's an image. Yeah, let's just go with this for now, and then I can just remove this. Okay. So now I should have an image URL associated with each one of these guys. That would also let me, when I generate this HTML right here, you know what, I actually don't even need to put an image URL. Let's just keep this simpler. And maybe let's put this code back to say that this is of type image. Now inside of here, I can say if item type equal image, then we're going to do something else. We're still going to generate an iframe. And instead of iframe, we're going to change this to just say text. Now it's a little bit more generic. And this text is going to equal not sure if this will work or not, but I'm going to try it. I don't know if it's going to like me doing that inside of a controller, but I'm going to give it a shot. It did not like that. Let's try it. Let's all right, so okay, so if I change this to URL 4, then that works, but I don't think you can use the image tag inside of a controller. I was hoping that I could, but I don't think it's going to work. So what we can do is just make our own tag. Like this. Let's do it this way. Okay, and then you would also want to add like a name equal something, quotes, and an alt. So this could be item name. All right, let's give that a try.
Now you've got an extra quotation in line 45.
Oh, sure enough. Sublime does that to me. Drives me
I know,
crazy.
why?
I really need to figure out how to turn that off, because it always chooses wrong when I just need a single quote. Okay. All right, so there we go. Let's take a look at the HTML again. So there's our content items, and you can see that we have this text with an image. So now if I, oh, actually, I was going to look at one other thing. Make sure that we have the URL correct. And we do not. That's going to be a problem, because see, it says the source is just uts.png. That's unfortunate. So I'm guessing this, yeah, it's going to just give us a broken image link. Okay, so URL 4 isn't going to work here. So we'll go back to image URL. Now, image URL is a view helper method, so it's not available in the controller. And so you can do view underscore context dot image URL, and it should work. So now when I click UTS logo, retrieves the content. And the logo actually shows up now. The rich editor in Canvas won't show iframes, but it will show images. So there we go. All right.
That's awesome. Yay.
So we made some progress.
Great.
Now I think that typically when you create one of these things, when you create this extension for the rich media editor, HTML editor, I need to figure out a shorter name for this thing. The items that are loaded here are probably not going to be hard-coded in your Rails application ahead of time. So we might not have to deal with this, this mechanism of using the Rails asset pipeline. Instead, what you might do is have another interface for uploading assets, or I don't know, you're going to have some way of getting all of these things into your system. When you do that, those items are probably going to live maybe in an S3 bucket, for example. And if that's where they are, then the Rails asset pipeline won't be a thing at all. You'll just have a link, or a URL rather, to that item inside of the S3 bucket. And so you won't have to deal with the asset pipeline. Does that make sense? So it just really depends on how you architect your application. So one example might be a large database of videos. If you have a whole bunch of videos, you're not going to pre-code all those videos into a Rails application. Instead, you're going to have some tool for uploading those videos, maybe to YouTube, and then storing off the URLs to the videos. And the URLs will live inside of your database. And then what you would do is, inside of this BuildContent method, however you get each item, it could say, is my type video? And if it is, it would know to do something like item.video URL or YouTube URL, and then it would insert that right here. And since that's a direct link to the item out on, I'm sorry, you wouldn't insert it right here because it wouldn't be an image. You'd have to generate the HTML to display a video, of course. But the URL for that video is going to be somewhere out on YouTube. It's not going to be changed by the Rails asset pipeline. Same thing with a large database of images. Maybe you build an application that has a whole bunch of pieces of art in it for an art class. And so those items maybe just live on one of your internal servers. But the URL for each of those items is going to be something on that server, and it's not going to pass that image URL through the asset pipeline where it's going to get changed. Instead, it'll just be the original URL to the image on that server, and that's what would be in your database. So I think that you can probably avoid a lot of these hassles with the asset pipeline. Okay, so let's test this out and see how far we can go with the HTML. Canvas might strip out certain tags, but let's add a script tag and see what happens. All right, so we've just tacked it on to the image, so when I push this button, in theory it should insert that script tag. I don't know if it actually will do it. Let's find out. Let's just save the page. No, it encoded it. So
then you'd have to use iframes if you want to get any JavaScript in there.
Yeah, I think if you want to do anything sophisticated, it looks like iframes are the way to go.
Okay.
So, and that's understandable. I can see why they wouldn't want you inserting just any old JavaScript inside of their code. But let's try a couple other things. So if I insert just a paragraph tag with a style of, because were you saying that they strip out styles?
I think they might. So I think they call the Canvas CSS and not the CSS in your app, which makes sense.
Oh, okay, but I should be able to do something like font size.
I think you can define it yourself, but if you were referencing a style from your build.
Oh, okay. So you're saying if you do something like this, class equals.
Yeah. Big pink paragraph. Then. Yeah.
Because then if you did that, you'd also have to insert the link tag type equals. Is this right? I can never remember the syntax for style tag.
Who does?
That's
what Emmett is for.
That's right. There we go. That's what it looks like. I was doing it wrong. Crap. I pasted it wrong. Okay. So if I did something like that where it references an external file, of course this would have to be something accessible on the internet, right? Like it'd have to be out there. Let's grab Twitter Bootstrap off of a CDN. I don't know. Let's grab all this crap. Let's see what happens. Let's throw it all in there. So pretty sure it's not going to let us do the script tag right here, but we'll see. All right, so we've got 2 style sheets and a script tag. And here we go. And then this would be something like there. Just give it some random Bootstrap styling. Okay, there we go. This guy. Get rid of all that. Um, It grabbed it. Look at that.
Wow,
That's interesting.
that's exciting.
So
But
that
I think Canvas does use Twitter Bootstrap, so can we go for something a little bit
that's true.
more outlandish?
Yeah, let's try something different here. I wanted to take a look at this really quickly just to see. You know what? I think it stripped it all out because look, there's our image, there's our paragraph, and I think that it is getting it just because Canvas uses Twitter Bootstrap. So that was a bad example. I don't think it let any of that stuff in. I think it threw it all out.
Yeah, like semantic or material UI or
Yeah, let's go grab.
materialize.
Okay, so let's grab this guy right here. So let's just grab the styling this time and see if that does anything for us. And we'll grab these guys to style it. Actually, let's grab that whole. Come on, there we go. Grab this button. Okay. Save that. Stuff. I think it threw it all out. Let's verify something else too. I want to make sure that it's showing up correctly right here. So it is. You can see that it has that link out to the CDN. But then I think Canvas just throws it away. So I think they must have some filters in place, which makes sense. I mean, I can understand why you'd want to do that. So yeah, if you want your own styling, if you want to use your own external style sheets, if you want to add JavaScript, I think you're stuck using an iframe.
Yeah, or the global, like in custom JavaScript and CSS.
Yeah, yeah. You can totally edit the global Canvas JavaScript and CSS. They discourage it and don't like it, but a lot of people have to do it because there's no other way to make certain things work. So,
yeah,
it's kind of
awesome. Well, thank you. That saved me all the time.
Oh, you bet.
Just try that out, yeah.
Okay.
Because I would have convinced myself that I was doing something wrong.
No,
that's great.
It's all. Oh, it's fun. It just takes a little bit of experimenting. Sometimes it takes a little bit of hacking. Not every feature that is supported in Canvas is well documented. There are a few kind of secret sort of things floating around. So sometimes you can get stuff like that to work. Sometimes the script tags or the whatever. There might even be a way to make it work. I can ask around. I suspect that there's not because, like I said, it does pose a pretty serious security threat. Because if I could insert any old script tag, then I could do some cross-site scripting, and that would be bad. But yeah, so there you have it.
Yeah. Sweet. Thank you so much.
Oh, you bet.
Awesome.